Hi there, this is Mark Burnett, and welcome to the Chapter 1 on the complete guide to a 3D artist career. So this is going to be an absolutely massive course. Thank you so much for taking it. And, go grab a cup of coffee or multiple ones. This is going to be a very long ride. We have a lot of stuff to cover. So I will go into a kind of like an overview of all the content that we'll be covering. But first, let me talk about what's going on in the background here, just to give you an idea of what this is all about. So those are all the things that I did throughout my career. Of course, it's just a sample, samples of what I've created throughout all the years that I've been in the video game industry. But some of these are very old. Like this one is like very old, a little over 10 years old. And so those are going to be like images, kind of showing in the background as I cover the different topics that I need to talk about. But we'll get back to this a little bit later. But for now, I am going to be doing an overview of the entire course. So the whole thing is going to be split in 7 chapters plus a bonus one. And but anyway, so the first chapter is going to be this particular one. So we are going to be talking about the what, the why, and the how of this whole thing. So if you don't know, if you're not sure that this is for you, or if you're just wondering, could this potentially be for me, this career in 3D art, this will hopefully answer most of your questions, or at least give you kind of a good overview of what you're getting into with this course. And so I'll be talking about kind of like my background, so that you know who I am and kind of like where I'm coming from, to be to be doing this entire course. And also I'll look at we are going to be looking at what a 3D artist is, what the job is, what it entails, and kind of like what you'll be doing. And then why would you want a career in 3D art? And then finally, how you actually get started, what you need, the kind of stuff, how do you get on your way to getting this ball rolling. So the chapter 2 is going to be about mostly a techniques overview. So we'll be looking at all the different software, and I'll be creating two different demos, one for a low poly hand painted asset. So it's going to be very simple assets, just kind of like a cube, just to give you an idea of what the process is. So what we'll be using kind of later on when we actually do the full characters. And the second one is going to be another cube, but for more current gen engines, so with PBR ready textures, and all the more current techniques that artists use for current gen games. So this is going to be kind of a beginner friendly chapter. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, this is going to be for you. We'll kind of go through all the different steps, and I'll be doing the demos real time so that you can follow along. And this is also the chapter to skip if you are well acquainted with all those different things. But this should give you a really good overview of what different softwares all the different software that we'll be using are, and kind of like the different ones that you can get and all this stuff. So that is going to be for chapter 2. And then chapter 3, I'll be talking about various things about the 3D industry. So all the things that are kind of like good to know, if this is something that you are seriously considering. And chapter 4, this is where it becomes a little bit crazy time-wise. So chapter 4 and chapter 5 we're going to be making the two different characters. So the first one is going to be a hand-painted character. So there are different techniques. Obviously, we're not going to be covering all of them, but we are going to be covering two of the most popular ones, for most games, at least nowadays. So the first one, as I said, hand painted. This is gonna be the stuff for like video, for kind of like old school video games, or like mobile games, stuff that needs performance mostly. So like stuff on like phones or portable devices. And then for this I'll go through all the different steps, and to create the finished asset. And then we'll be doing in chapter 5 kind of like the same thing, but creating a different character for current gen engines. So a full, PBR character using all the tools basically that professionals today use. These for most of those tools. So obviously every studio is different, and every team, every artist uses a different kind of set of tools. But what we'll be using here is kind of like all the core stuff, all the things that for sure you will need, and I'll show you kind of like what I use, all the peripheral software that I use to be able to create to create pretty badass looking assets. And then the chapter 6. So chapter 6 is going to be on everything about building your portfolio, how to create a kick-ass portfolio after creating all these cool assets. And then chapter 7, so the final real chapter, is going to be about getting a job. Everything that you need to know, everything that you need to do to get that job. And then bonus chapter, we'll see later. So that is pretty much it for the overview. So there's a lot of stuff to cover here. It's going to be multiple hours, but it should be very, very interesting. So moving on to this first chapter now that we've done the overview. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of like my background and everything that I've done throughout my career, basically, so that you get a better idea of who I am and in what kind of position I am to give you this course. So it all began back in, I don't even know what year, like 2007, I think, was when I started in the video game industry. So back then I was just a student in school. I was studying 3D animation, but I only had been studying with Maya for about a couple months, and then I got a job offer to work at a company in Montreal called A2M as a concept artist, because back then I had a pretty good online presence as a concept artist. So I got the job, long story short, and I started working there at 19, and I worked at A2M, now called Behavior Interactive, for about 2 years. So the first year was mostly doing concepts, and then the second year I transitioned to 3D. And I had the help of all the awesome artists there, I became more like a hybrid 2D 3D artist. And then by the end of my time there, I was doing mostly like 80% of my time was dedicated to 3D, and then 20% to concept. So I got to wear many hats, and it was pretty awesome. It was kind of like this indie studio feel within that bigger company, because we were working on a bunch of different game prototypes, and they were trying to develop their their next gen engine. So we were there to help push the tech. And then once I was there, like about 2 years in, I got this email from Blizzard, and they asked me if I want to be on their new team that they were developing. So I said, of course, this is what I did for that. So not that great, as you can see. That was the art test that I did to get the job. But yeah, essentially it was a job as a concept artist again. So I did the concept part, and that was obviously the strongest the strongest part of this whole art test. But they also asked to do a 3D thing. So I did the 3D part, and that was kind of bad, but it was enough to get me the job. So I did all the interviews, I did the art test, everything passed. I went there to do the in-person interview in California, and that went well as well. And then a little bit later, I got a job offer. So, working on Blizzard was something that I really always kind of hoped would happen in my career, although I didn't really believe that it would. It was more like a wild fantasy, but it actually worked out. So the reason why I'm saying I didn't really think that this would ever happen was because I quit school, so I didn't have a degree. But the lawyers, their lawyers, pretty crafty, and they found a way to legally bring me over. And so I started working at Blizzard as a 2D artist, although the contract that I signed was as a 3D artist. So so that's what I did most of my time there. So I did for a couple months concepts, I did concepts throughout my career there, but it was 95% it was me doing 3D characters. So those are the stuff that's playing in the back now is all the stuff that I kind of did. So this character here, was when I was on the StarCraft team for a very brief period of time. So what happened is I joined their new team there, the team working on the Titan, and that was a what you now know as Overwatch. And so I worked on Titan for about 5 years, and yeah, for about 5 years. So I was one of the early member of that team. So it was a really awesome time back then. So we were, developing this brand new game, and we were just a handful of us. So it was really cool. It was an amazing kind of like learning experience. And then once they reset the game and kind of like scrapped the MMO elements out of it and just kept it kind of like the FPS and what then became Overwatch. I moved teams to the StarCraft team, so that's why I did the StarCraft character there. And then the StarCraft team, some of you may know, but it's now 2 different teams. So it's StarCraft and Heroes of the Storm, although StarCraft's kind of gone now. But so I spent the remaining time at Blizzard working on Heroes of the Storm. So that was about 3 years that I worked on that team. So those are all the characters that I did there in the back. Everything you've been seeing here is stuff that I did. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I did a lot of different characters. And what was fun with that particular game is that it's, the game was out. So you were making the characters, and then like a month and a half, 2 months later, they were coming out and people were playing with them. So that was pretty, that was pretty awesome to see kind of like the feedback from the players. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So, as far as the assets that I did a bunch of stuff, and it's unfortunate, but everything that I did on Titan, those 5 years, it's kind of like this black hole in my career, and especially in my portfolio, because I can't show anything. So yeah, that's kind of a bummer. But yeah, everything you see is just like personal stuff and things that I think that I did that are now public, so I can actually show it. But yeah, at least my only consolation is that a lot of the stuff that I did while I was working on Titan ended up in the actual the final game in Overwatch. So like Tracer, for example, is a character that I worked on for the most part. I did I don't know how many versions of her, maybe like 3, 4, 5 versions. And then what she would look like in the game right now. It's slightly different, but it's mostly the same, the same character. And then, same deal with a lot of the different other characters. So yeah, it's, it's a bummer, but at least, I can see that all the work that I did, even though it's now doesn't have my name on it because I wasn't on that team, at least it didn't go to waste, so. But yeah, so that's pretty much it, as far as my career. So, after those 3 years on the Heroes team, I just I quit. So I decided to dedicate all my time. You probably know this, but I decided to dedicate 100% of my time to my company, my startup company. So this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing now. So that's the reason why I left. And yeah, that sums up my career. So about 10 years in the game industry. So it was a really fun ride. And that is yeah, so that's who I am. Now onto the real stuff, so what the first thing that I wanted to talk about is what is a 3D artist. So that's a very important question that you really need to understand before you actually get started on that path. So a 3D artist, the biggest, I guess, like the most obvious answer would be he's the person, or she's the person that takes the idea, the concept from a concept artist and translates it as the best as you can, with the needed modifications into 3D. So you take a drawing and you make a 3D asset out of it. So the good example is all those heroes that I did on Heroes of the Storm. The concept artist there, even though I designed some of them, Samwise is the one that's that did the sketches for all of them. So it'll give you like this black and white sketch, and then you have to make a character like this out of it. And yeah, that's mostly how it goes. So the kind of drawings that you'll get, the kind of designs that you'll get will vary depending on where you're working and who you're working with. But essentially, this. Oh, and by the way, this, I also got to do the tracer for the Heroes of the Storm version. So at least they gave me that little bit. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, I did her. But yeah, back on what it is. So yeah, depending on what you get, your job is still to translate something that's in 2D into 3D. So this can vary a lot where you are working, and I'm talking here about kind of like the indie game industry versus the AAA game industry, like the big studios versus small studios. So the things that you'll do vary greatly depending on how many people you're working with. So if you're at a very, very small studio, which we'll call that an indie studio, it means that this people are not going to be super specialized because you really can't. You have to wear many hats, and that's something that's very important. The art industry is the game industry is very, very, very large, and there's a lot of indie studios. There's a lot of big studios, and like the direction that you take as far as kind of like the assets that you produce and the stuff that you put in your portfolio will impact a lot your options when it comes to indie versus AAA. So what you'll do as an artist in indie studios, you'll do a lot of stuff. So for example, if you're a 3D artist there, you might be doing like characters, you might be doing also environments and props, and maybe even like terrain, and building you might even do like some environment like level design to some extent. So depending on the amount of people, you'll get to do more or less stuff. For AAA studios, it's very, very split. So you'll have like character artists for sure, and then you have environment artists, and then prop artists, and then from there you can split it even more. So the bigger the studio, and the bigger the studio, the more specialized you become. So there are, for different studios, depending on what they need to focus on, that you might have like artists that are just doing weapons. For example, on the Overwatch team at Blizzard, that's what they do. So they have like weapons guys, because the weapon is very, very important. Same thing on all the other, like in Battlefield or like Call of Duty. It's the same stuff. Like you have people dedicated to certain aspects of the game depending on their importance. Some of the games you'll have people that take care of the hair of all the characters. That's all they do, just hair. Other games you'll have like shader artists. That's all they do, just shaders for like for skin, for clothes, for all this stuff. All they do is make the shaders look really, really nice. In some studios it's even more split, where you'll have like character artists that only do like sculpting, and then other character artists that do the textures and the bakes. So basically what I'm saying here is that like how specialized you are will really impact like your options. So yeah, if you're a jack of all trade, a really good fit for you would be an indie studio, and if you're very specialized into like particular things, then maybe a AAA game studio is more for you. So, and also depends, like what do you like, right? So that's pretty much what it is, to be an artist. So like the broad sense of the word. And then why would you want a career in 3D? So there's obviously a bunch of reasons, like a bunch of personal reasons, obviously. So you like to do 3D because it's awesome to see your drawing, or to see a drawing kind of like turn into something that you can rotate around and you can see moving like this, like a animated. So this is, for me, like by far the biggest thing, when you see your character that you model like be animated like this. And it's just, it's awesome, right? So I guess it's the thing that makes you feel the most like a god, almost. Like, I don't want to say this, but it's a very, very interesting feeling to see something that you create, kind of like take a life of its own. Especially if you get to do the concept as well. So you draw your character, whatever it is that you're doing, your prop, your weapon, your environment, and whatever, and then to see that in real life, like maybe you're walking into your environment, or maybe you're just rotating around your character and seeing it move, is just like you're you gave life to something, like you created something out of nothing. It's just this, it's amazing. It's amazing. Completely amazing. And it still blows my mind after all this time. So yeah, that's, for me, that would be like kind of like the more like personal aspect of it, of the why. But I mean, 3D artists are in high demand, and that is never going to go away, at least not in the foreseeable future, because 3D art is just, it's everywhere now, especially with VR. It's just, the industry keeps growing and growing and growing, so there will never be a shortage of artists, of art position, of positions as 3D artists. With the new technologies, the job itself might change a little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's a thing that's here to stay, and it's just growing, year after year. So being a 3D artist, there's a lot of career potential there, which is really, really great. And as opposed to perhaps a concept art career where the position's a little bit more limited, the ratio of concept artists versus 3D artists in most studios is, very favorable to 3D artists. So you might have, for each concept artist, maybe like something like, I'm averaging here, and it obviously depends of the studios, but on average, it's one concept artist for 3 to 4 to 5 3D artists. So, as you can see here, there's a lot more positions open for 3D arts. And so yeah, it makes it a little bit more of a possible career, like a more achievable career. And the fact that you're also working off of other people's concepts, it means the job is, of course, it's creative, but it's mostly technical at its core. It's just a technical job. So if you can do that really, really well, and then you can copy other stuff, you can bring somebody else's creation into life, like really, really technically well, then you're good to go. So also that aspect of the job makes it kind of like, it opens the door for a lot more people, I would say. And yeah, and how do you get started doing this, right? So we've covered the what's and why, and now how do you get started? So a lot of people, will say that you need to go to school for stuff like that, but I would beg to defer. So what I did personally, I took a really, really small class, a small 3D class. I knew basically nothing of Maya once when I left school, and I still was able to create this career for myself in as a 3D artist. So you really, really do not need school. So the one thing that you'll need school for, and I will admit that, is if you want to move around, if you wanted to go work in a different country. So if you're, for example, outside of the United States and you want to get a job, at Blizzard or at, whatever other company, you will need a visa. And then visas are a little bit of a, bitch to get. You need a degree. So that might be kind of like the one good aspect that I would say. The one good thing about having a degree and going to art school would be to get that degree, to be able to more easily have that visa that allows you to work, kind of like everywhere, anywhere you want. And but really, you really don't, like, technically wise, artistically wise, you really do not need to go to school. All you need is a tutorial like this, right? So a course like this, I'm going to show you guys everything that I know, everything that you can possibly need to know. So it's all stuff that I didn't learn in school. I didn't actually learn anything in school that was worth it for my career. I don't know, like, I don't want to say 100%, but 95% of the people I talked to that went to art school always end up saying it was a waste of money. That they could have learned that stuff somewhere else, more effectively somewhere else, at obviously more like less expensive, like cheaper elsewhere. So I would highly recommend that you don't focus on school too much. Get these more targeted tutorials to help you get the skills that you actually need for the job. So something like this, something that's like what we're doing right now. So and of course, you'll need a bunch of software. So unlike a concept artist, where you can just start to practice with a pen and paper, 3D art is not quite like that, unfortunately. So there's a big a big barrier of entry there, where you need to have of course a computer to run all the software, and then you need a bunch of different software. So, sculpting software, modeling software, and then, texturing software. And the list goes on and on and on. And we'll look at all those different software in the next chapter. But, this is one of the things, it's just like you need a lot of stuff. You need to have decent amount of money to even just begin, because you need a computer. And even though you can get like a shit computer, if you're going to be doing 3D, you want something that's a little bit decent, at least, to be able to create something and not pull your hair out, as you're working on it, because it's just too slow and it doesn't render right. So yeah, you need a computer, and then you need certain software. So if you want to begin without spending any money, on top of having an actual computer, I would highly recommend that you begin with getting Blender, which is a free modeling software, and also Sculptris, which is also a free kind of like free sculpting software, which is by the makers by Pixologic, which the makers of ZBrush. So it's a toned down version of ZBrush, and then Blender is you can do pretty much everything in Blender. You can create like really, really nice assets, and it is free. So get those two, start playing with them, and then there's one more thing that you need, of course, and it is a concept. So as I said, 3D artists work off of other people's concepts for the most part. You might be lucky and actually be able to do your own concepts for your 3D characters, or your 3D assets. But most of the time you'll work off of somebody else's, and then in this case you'll be working off of mine. So it'll be those two that we'll be making. So the low poly hand painted character will be the naked version here. So and then the other one, the PBR version, is going to be the armored version, and those are going to be the ones that I am going to be using. And, if you can look for other concepts if you want, but normally, people always want you to ask them if you're going to be modeling something and then putting that in your portfolio for like your own benefit. But yeah, those two, if you want to use them, I'm just telling you right now, you can go ahead and use them. Of course, it'd be nice if you can add the credits where where you got those concepts, but go ahead and you can work off of those if you want to follow along. There you go. This is what we'll be making in the following chapters. We have a lot of stuff to cover, so let's get started onto the next chapter. So I'll see you then.